Well, my fears are that he's going to sell out American interests for his own personal interests. Remember, he has at least one son I saw on this trip who has been clouding all of our foreign policy by doing deals with the very nations that are negotiating with us for high technology chips and for other business. Remember, this is the family that has made tens of millions of dollars in partnerships with the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other countries that undermine, I believe, the objectivity of our foreign policy decisions. So when Trump goes over there with more business leaders and business partners of his family than with actually China experts, everybody in America should be concerned.
It's actually more like billions with a B. For Donald Trump, grift appears to always have been a family affair, and the latest trip, even what's happening in public, is no different. As Donald Trump touched down in China, he was trailed by his son, Eric, not to mention some of his own top political donors. The Trump administration claimed that there was nothing improper about Eric Trump's appearance on the trip, saying that he doesn't have business dealings in China or plans to do business in China, conveniently forgetting that Eric's close ties to a Chinese cryptocurrency firm, which has given a company partially owned by Eric Trump preferential access to technology and beneficial payments terms on hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment. It's not just these specific foreign business dealings. Donald Trump is in the midst of negotiating an up to $10 billion, again with the B, dollar taxpayer-funded payday for himself and his two adult sons. Negotiations are taking place right now with his own administration. On that, the New York Times reports this, quote, the Justice Department is holding internal discussions about settling Donald Trump's lawsuit against the IRS in the coming days. That's according to 3 people familiar with those deliberations. It's a move that could involve the government directly providing taxpayer funds or another public benefit to the president. A settlement payment, even a fraction of the size of Trump's requested $10 billion, could be much larger than his other attempts at private gain, potentially doubling his net worth. I want to bring into our coverage Norm Eisen. He served as special counsel for ethics and government reform in the White House under President Obama. He's now a senior fellow at Brookings and the executive chair of Democracy Defenders Fund. He was here Monday when we decided we would do this weekly, and it didn't take 3 days to need you to come back and have this conversation with us again. Also joining us, another Obama White House veteran, Pod Save America co-host John Lovett is here with us. He's a former speechwriter for both President Obama and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He is a co-founder of Crooked Media. We're so happy to see both of you. Norm, I asked you advice on and off television, right, about how to do a better job focusing in on the specific acts of corruption and then the broader vibe of corruption. And I guess I would differentiate, the vibe of getting off a plane with your family and sort of America's oligarchs is the vibe part of the question. And then the specific reporting about the actual conflicts inherent in all of this. And I wonder, you can take them in any order you want, but we knew we needed your thoughts on both those today.
Well, thanks for having me back so soon, Nicole. I'm not sure if it's a very good sign for the country that we have yet another corruption scandal, but glad to be back with you. Look, when I was doing this work in the White House, we never would have allowed the appearance issue of having outside businesses in which Donald Trump has himself financial interests being run by his son, Eric, and then promoting Eric by giving him this preferential treatment on the trip. Crypto has been one of the areas where the largest sums, and we don't even know what the totals are, have flowed in. We know that there is an Eric Trump Chinese crypto connection, according to reporting by The Guardian. And this is not an American image. This is something that the Chinese regime, with its princelings, where you have those who are in government and everyone understands the way to financially benefit them is through their family members, It's a familiar sight in China. That's not the idea of integrity that we promote in America. And the crypto-related scandals have been some of the worst of the corruption issues in this administration. So it is outrageous that Eric Trump, running the Trump family business, benefiting his father's pocketbook, his father who broke with the traditions of segregating these kinds of sums by having a blind trust. No, he wouldn't do that. So it's another disgrace in Donald Trump's record.
John Lovett, let me read you one more headline, and then I'll turn this over to you. It's from the Washington Post. Quote, prices for these grocery items spiked highest since the war began. Tomato prices soared 15% in April compared to a month ago. They're up 40% in the last year. Prices for Americans' beloved beef surged in April, are up 15% over last year. Grocery prices are up more than 18% since January 2022. And the energy shocks from the war are just now starting to be felt. I guess I asked you to sort of knit that in because corruption is a hallmark of Donald Trump's entire time in politics. I remember all of David Fahrenthal's great reporting about the Trump Hotel where all the foreign leaders had to stay and do business. So I think to some people it feels like the oldest Trump story we've been covering, but it is newly enraging to voters, including some of his own. Do you view that as a cumulative effect, or do you view that as a consequence of the economic hardship?
So it's extraordinary, right? Like, oh, you making a little money off hotel rooms, that's pocket change compared to where we are now. And I think the bigger question is, how do we get to the point where the president thinks he can get away with suing his own Justice Department, currently run by his former personal attorney, as the two sides attempt to reach a settlement in which he may personally receive billions of dollars in taxpayer money when the same case as it affected others was settled for no money? How do you get a point where that's even on the table? And it's because at each step along the way in Donald Trump's two presidencies, he has been a raptor testing the fences, seeing what he can get away with. And I would bet even he is surprised by how much he can get away with at this point. When Trump first went to China in his first term, it was a bit of a scandal that there were trademark approvals, I believe, for Ivanka's business interests. Right? And now we are talking about multi-billion-dollar schemes that are unprecedented in America. Yeah, Trump is the most corrupt president in history. He's the most corrupt person in any democracy in history. It's more on a scale, as Norm said, in China or Putin's Russia. And to me, it's about a lack of accountability, right? And that to me is what ties back to the prices. The fact that Donald Trump feels like he can go up to the cameras and say, in these negotiations over the Iran deal, I'm not thinking about the financial interests of the American people. I'm not thinking of anybody. The fact that he can be lining his pockets while people are struggling, while he's painting the reflecting pool and building ballrooms and focusing on everything other than the main issue that got him back into the White House, is because he doesn't feel accountable. And anytime he faces any form of accountability, whether it's from the Supreme Court or potentially in the election, he lashes out. He posts 75 times in 55 minutes. He tries to gerrymander his way out of any political accountability. And all of this, to me, ultimately falls on the Republicans in Congress. I think we have to come back to that. It is not Donald Trump is not the reason alone that we have an unprecedented quantum leap in corruption, unlike anything we have ever seen in the history of the Republic. It is because a Republican majority in Congress has abdicated their responsibility. There has never been a midterm in my life where the accountability was so necessary and clear, where the Republicans in Congress must be held responsible for what the president is doing. They are 100% to blame for how he is able to get away with this, because he should be investigated. He should be impeached and removed for dozens of offenses, quotidian violations of law, high crimes against the Constitution. Why even saying that sounds unrealistic is because of the Republicans in Congress and what they have forgiven or enjoyed.
It is such an important point.
And I didn't go to law school like Norm did. So I put more meat on the bone. But I mean, I don't think you need to be a lawyer at this point.
But as a poli-sci experiment, if you wanted to test what happens in a democracy if one of the three branches of government goes away, right? If you take out Congress, that's what we're all living through.